unanimous decision, and the new WBC Super Lightweight Female Champion of the World!
Motherfucking relay, we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. I'm sure most of you have heard already that the WBC have made their ruling. They have made their decision. And it appears that they are, in fact, going to let Vasyl Lomachenko, multi-division, unified champion Vasyl Lomachenko, fight for that vacant title against what is their mandatory challenger, Loma-Campbell. Do realize that Luke Campbell has been the mandatory challenger for that belt since Mikey Garcia had it. They actually ordered a fight between Mikey and Luke last fucking year, but for some reason, the WBC in all their wisdom allowed Mikey to hold on to that title while he went up to another weight class, having already ordered a fucking mandatory. The beauty of the WBC.
I know, right?
Now I'm gonna tell you that this isn't bad news. All things considered, it's not bad news for the fight fan, and here is why. It gives us a unification fight. It gives us a sense of absolution in the 135-pound division. That while the WBC might just be looking out for their best interest, that this is just another chapter of them chasing the biggest sanctioning fees that they can get, and we'll talk about that. That this might just be them looking out for themselves, not looking out for us, the fight fans, but this might just be them looking out for themselves, but it's still good news for us, because we get to see another unification fight. And I know that the unification fight that we wanted to see before was a fight between Loma and Mikey. But Mikey Garcia is the one that has made a decision to relinquish that belt and become an emeritus champion. That as soon as he wants a crack at that title, he'll get one. But for now, he doesn't plan on defending it against Luke. He doesn't plan on fighting at 135 in his next fight, so he's got to cough up that belt. I realized that the Mikey versus Loma fight was the fight that we originally wanted, but you got to make do with what you got. And if Mikey want to go somewhere else to do something else, that's not Loma's fault, and that's not Luke's fault. So it is what it is. Now, it appears that the fight for this vacant title, this unification fight, is going to be staged in the UK, not the US. According to Bob Arum, he's already been in contact with Eddie Hearn, who's shopping around for a venue to stage the fight. The rhyme and the reason for that is simple. You stage a fight wherever the fight is worth the most money. So while the boxing community over here in the States might be familiar with Loma, they're not familiar with Luke. Whereas over there in the United Kingdom, they're familiar with the both of them. It being that Luke Campbell is an Olympic gold medalist and Vasyl Lomachenko also an Olympic double gold medalist and a multi-division unified champion. Well, with those two guys put together over there in the UK, they could really pack a house, you know? They could really fill an arena with a fight like that if it lands over there. I'd go as far as saying that I wouldn't rule out this thing being staged as a pay-per-view. I know that it's early, I know that we're in the preliminary stages of orchestrating that contest, but I wouldn't rule it out. Now, that's not the only order that came down from the WBC. They've also ordered Devin Haney to square off against Haney-Abdullaev. Those are two guys whose names were in the hat, thrown into the hat to fight for what was the vacant title. You've got to realize there were a lot of people lining up to fight for that vacant title, and it was in the air as far as who was actually going to get the shot. Myself, I thought, you know, the WBC is motivated by the biggest sanctioning fees, and a fight between Luke and Loma can bring them bigger sanctioning fees than a fight between Luke and Devin or Luke and Zaur. So those things in mind, it was conceivable to me that while there are many names thrown in the hat, not to rule out the possibility that they give the shot to Loma, because a name like Loma tacked on to Luke's will bring them more money, more sanctioning fees. More so if the contest is staged in the UK, where they can generate considerable business, considerable revenue. So it looks like Haney is going to be squaring off against Abdullaev, and yet another order from the WBC was issued out for Teofimo Lopez to square off against Javier Fortuna. Now there, the WBC will experience a hiccup. You see, the fight between Haney and Abdullaev and the fight between Lopez and Fortuna is a makeshift tournament, so that the winners of both of those fights will square off against each other, and then the winner of that fight will get a shot at the WBC title. That's essentially what they're trying to do. They're trying to stage like a mini tournament. The thing about that is, Lopez is not being aimed at the WBC title. You understand? He's going in a different direction. Currently, he's about to participate in an IBF eliminator against Masayoshi Nakatani for what is Richard Commey's IBF title. Those two guys are going to be fighting each other for a crack at the red belt. And we actually covered that story here on the channel last week before this order from the WBC had even come down, because this order literally just came down today. According to Bob Arum, in spite of the WBC's best wishes, which he respects and Top Rank respects, that's not what they have planned out for Teofimo Lopez. They plan on putting him on the IBF route so that he can challenge Richard Commey for his belt. And you know what the rhyme and the reason for that is. If Teofimo Lopez makes it past Nakatani and he challenges Richard Commey and beats him also, Teofimo Lopez becomes a world champion, thereby making a potential fight with him and Vasyl Lomachenko a unification fight for all the belts. I like the plan. Because it gives Teofimo what he wants. I'm pretty sure he wants to be a champion, but what he might want even more than that is a crack at Vasyl Lomachenko. And in that way, it gives him what he wants. It would give Lomachenko what he wants because he wants to challenge champions. You know, he told Teofimo Lopez, if he wants a fight, get a fucking belt, we can have a fight. That's what Teofimo's, that's essentially what he's trying to do. So I like the plan. It gives everybody what they want. It gives the fighters what they want, but it also gives the fans what they want, because we want that absolution throughout the weight classes. We want to see one guy holding all the belts, and this affords us the opportunity to see that. So I like the plan. It's a solid plan, provided nobody gets injured, there are no hiccups, and everybody comes out on top. What we might be looking at is an undisputed champion in the lightweight division in approximately 3 fights. And in those 3 fights, in that duration of time, that affords Top Rank the opportunity to really build that thing up into a pay-per-view worthy event. Because if you tried to stage it now, maybe hardcores like me and you might care enough to purchase it, but the casuals won't. And rest assured that these guys intend to turn over a profit. I mean, look at what happened with the Crawford versus Khan fight. We might think Crawford is a great fighter and all that jazz, but in the realm of pay-per-view success, the rumors regarding the numbers for that fight, they're not very encouraging. I mean, we're talking about potentially, 100,000, if that. Those aren't good numbers. Top Rank means to turn over a profit. So they're going to build this Lomachenko versus Lopez fight. And those 3 fights allow them the opportunity to build that fight. We know that Lopez, he's a very outspoken kid. He doesn't make any bones about the shit he says, and he don't got no hair on his tongue. That compels the audience at large to either want to see the fight because they think Lopez has a chance, or to want to see the fight because they want to see him get humbled. But one way or another, it compels people to want to see the fight. So just imagine how much buildup they could have for that fight while Lopez tries to become a champion and while Loma looks to unify another title. Just imagine how much the buildup will be beneficial to those fighters. And it's not unnecessary buildup, it's necessary buildup so that the fight itself can be for the undisputed lightweight championship. Because without a belt, Loma's not going to give Lopez the time of day. So Lopez is doing what he's got to do to get a belt. So my reaction to this development is it's good news. I think it's good news for the fighters, good news for the weight class, good news for the sport of boxing, because the world titles are no longer being all tied up in the politics of boxing so that we can get back to the sport of boxing. Guys who want to fight each other and are doing what they've got to do to make it happen. And I hate to say this because I'm actually a fan of Mikey Garcia. That's a fighter that I still hold in some high regard, some high esteem. But at the end of the day, you see how quickly things start to move along once a Heyman fighter isn't involved, once a Heyman fighter isn't in the picture, and all those issues aren't stifling the process that leads to undisputed champions. I mean, do you see how quickly things can fall into place so long as Heyman and his stable of fighters aren't a factor? Do you see how quickly things start to happen? And people wonder, why is it that Al Heyman and his stable of fighters come under fire so often? And, stuff like this is why. Had Mikey Garcia still been there, holding that WBC title, an undisputed championship would have been put on hold for God knows how long. But remove the Heyman fighter, remove Heyman from the equation, and you see the wheels start to turn. You see things start to happen. I mean, you can't just explain it away with the atypical explanations of cross-promotional or cross-network issues because, Luke Campbell's a matchroom guy and Vasyl Lomachenko's a top-ranked guy. That's a cross-promotional situation. And in spite of that, Eddie Hearn and Bob Arum are still able to orchestrate situations amongst themselves because they just did. They just did it with Anthony Crolla and Vasyl Lomachenko, and now they're doing it again with Luke Campbell and Vasyl Lomachenko. Whereas whenever there's a Heyman fighter involved, Things get stifled. Fights don't happen. No matter what the scale, what the size, what the magnitude, what the fan demand is for the fight. No matter the case, fights don't happen. Fights don't get made. And I'm of the opinion that given everything that's been going on in recent memory, had Mikey Garcia decided not to relinquish that WBC title, an undisputed champion at 135, it likely wouldn't have happened. But now, it is that much more possible when you take Heyman out of the equation, when you take one of the fighters that fight under his banner, anybody in his stable, when you take them out of the equation, fights start to happen. Wheels are in motion. I mean, that immediately came to mind as soon as I saw that Mikey Garcia was going to vacate that title. That, you know what, as much as I would like to see him fight Vasyl Lomachenko, it doesn't seem like a priority to Mikey. So I don't know that we're ever going to get an undisputed champion in that weight class. But if he relinquishes that title, well, now, it's possible. I don't know that somewhere down the line, maybe something will happen. There will be some rumbles. Somebody will cross the street. I don't know that Mikey Garcia versus Vasyl Lomachenko is completely off the table as far as the far future. But in the near future, doesn't look like a possibility. And you know what? 135 is not suffering for it. Because one way or another, that division is going to get absolution from fighters that actually want to fight. Now, Devin Haney took to Twitter in reaction to the WBC's ruling, this recent development, and this is what he had to say about it. He said, "I'm in no rush. I'm 20 and blessed to be in the position I'm in. My time will come." Spoken like a consummate professional, because he's absolutely right. There will be other world title opportunities just like this one. This might have been the first, but it won't be the last. And for a fighter as talented as Devin Haney, that's almost a guarantee. You can almost guarantee that there will be other opportunities for Devin Haney to fight for a world title just like this one. But at this point in the juncture, for a young talented fighter like Devin Haney, who's still developing, a world title and the responsibilities that come with it are not something that he needs right now. That what he needs to do right now is to continue to perfect and hone his skills, master his craft, master the sweet science, so that by the time he does contend for a world title, he can not only win it, but defend it against whosoever dares to challenge him for it. That applies to the challengers and the other champions. But right now, at what, 20 years old? I don't think he's ready for everything that comes with being a world champion. So when he says that he's blessed to be in the position that he's in and that his time will come, I'm in 100% agreement with that. You put a young fighter like this in a situation to where he becomes a champion very early in his career, there's a novelty to that. There's a ring to it. But there are also responsibilities associated with that. And once you run around calling yourself a world champion, you're subject to those responsibilities. You're subject to that standard. And I don't think Devin Haney needs to be put in that situation right now. So maybe the WBC ruled in favor of Loma fighting for that belt for the simple fact that they just know he can bring them bigger sanctioning fees than a Devin Haney or a Abdullaev. Maybe that was the reason they did it. But whatever the reason, Haney benefits from that because it affords him the opportunity to have other interim fights to further develop his skills. So by the time that world title opportunity is in front of him, he's ready for everything that comes with it. So overall, the WBC's ruling, at least in my opinion, is good news for more reasons than one. But along with some good news that we got today, we also got some bad news. Some bad news involving Alexander Usyk's heavyweight debut and how he suffered a torn bicep and he's not going to be able to fight on May 25th, thereby jeopardizing the overall card. And I'll tell you the truth that on that kind of notice, the card was supposed to go down, don't know if it still is, but the card was supposed to be going down, what, little over 3 weeks from now, and Jessica McCaskill's fight with Haney-Abdullaev Sanchez, the unification fight at 140 pounds, that fight was going to be featured on the undercard. But now that Usyk is not going to be fighting, it was his event and he's not going to be fighting, it's questionable whether or not they'll decide to go ahead with the card, because who can they muster up on this kind of notice to salvage that card?
No idea.
It's actually very disappointing because I was looking forward to Jessica McCaskill's fight, her unification fight with Haney-Abdullaev Sanchez. I mean, to be completely honest, I was more interested in her fight than Usyk's fight. To be completely honest, I was actually looking forward to seeing her unify those two world titles, and I'm not sure that fight will be postponed along with whatever else they had planned on the card. I can only hope that the fight is still a go and they'll just reschedule it to a later date, but that the fight will go down. The question now becomes, one, is that what's going to happen? And two, how long is it going to take Alexander Usyk to recover from this injury? A torn bicep, that can be pretty debilitating for a guy with a work rate like Alexander Usyk, a work rate that's pretty pivotal to his overall approach in the ring. Usyk is a guy that can throw a lot of punches, and that's a virtue for a man that size, to be able to be such a busy, nimble fighter in spite of being such a heavy fighter, you understand. He's very agile, very quick, very fast hands, very good combinations, and, a torn bicep, it's pretty obvious that a torn bicep can hamper his ability given his unique approach to the sport of boxing. So I'm wondering, how long is that torn bicep going to keep him out of action? And whether or not they can find some kind of way to either salvage this card, this May 25th card, or simply reschedule whatever was on that card to a later date. I'm very much disappointed by that news. Hopefully we get to see Jessica McCaskill at a later date if they do decide to postpone the card, and hopefully it'll still be for a unification fight. Because in the realm of women's boxing, particular to the American market, it needs more fighters like Jessica McCaskill getting that exposure, fighting on such a platform and unifying world titles in the process. It needs more faces so that it can carry the sport here the same way that fighters like Katie Taylor, Chantel Cameron, Natasha Jonas, Katarina Thanders, Sophia Leash are helping to carry the sport over there in Europe. They've got a huge talent pool to choose from of fighters that exhibit elite level qualities in junction with fan-friendly styles. And Jessica McCaskill is just such a fighter that can represent those same virtues for our homegrown female fighters here in the United States. Understand that Jessica McCaskill is a fan-friendly fighter with a fan-friendly style that is willing to take chances. So, I'm just hoping that she gets that opportunity, that if by some chance the card overall is scrapped, that her fight isn't completely off and it's merely postponed, that she does get the opportunity to unify those two world titles at a later date.